So hello to everyone. Okay, so I just give a quick brief about Yayasan Hasanah first, and then we'll go into the social enterprise program. So Yayasan Hasanah is a foundation. It's the philanthropic arm of Khazanah Nasional, which is Malaysia's sovereign fund. It was set up a good 10 years ago, basically to deploy funding into the civil society sector in Malaysia. Now, the traditional way in which we intervene in the civil society sector is by way of providing funding and a small degree of non-funding support to non-profits, right? And this is basically to run projects and initiatives across 5 pillars, which is in the education pillar, community development, which is largely poverty alleviation, environment, arts, heritage, culture, and knowledge. Now, there was a turning point that we came to in 2020 and 2021 due to the pandemic. It was a time where a lot of the civil society actors really became very visible and became very effective in deploying last mile support. And quite a number of them were social enterprises. Deploying whether it's face masks or whether it's food to areas and communities that were struggling and struggling to receive support, right? I think the government machinery also at that time were stretched. And so the social enterprises really stepped up and really showed their capabilities, their ability to be efficient and effective in deploying funding, and not funding, but deploying resources. So in 2022, the Ministry of Finance, well, actually it's 2021, the Ministry of Finance of Malaysia came to Yayasan Hasanah and said that if we could also develop a program to support social enterprises. And so that began our journey, Yayasan Hasanah's journey into providing early stage funding, grants initially, to social enterprises in the country, right? And so this program continues till today, up to 2024. Essentially, it's a partnership between the Ministry of Finance and Yayasan Hasanah to deploy funding, right? And as we do more of this work, we are getting a better sense of, the kind of interventions that's required to kind of really grow the ecosystem. I think there's a long way to go. I think the speaker before me, Jacqueline herself, has also indicated there are still quite a number of gaps that we need to close over time, but I think if we all work together, I think we'll get there. So this is just a short snapshot of the Yayasan Hasanah portfolio. This does not tell the full story because as of today, we have onboarded 128 social enterprises across the country. What you see in the slide is only 61. So the difference is what you see on the slides are basically our cohorts from 2022 and 2023, which total 61 social enterprises. And in 2024, we are going to onboard another 70 social enterprises across the country. And of this 128, about 20 of them are from Sarawak. It's a rather good coverage across the country, and I'll explain how we've got that coverage. Now, the sectors in which we, not intentionally, but what we've seen that the sectors are typically coming from in the social mobility and upskilling sector. Circularity, so there's a lot of circularity particularly with regards to things like plastic upcycling, battery regeneration. Sustainable agriculture is also another key sector. Waste management, education, mental health, another one. So we see mental health is another growth sector, which a lot of early stage companies are developing technological solutions to solve this growing problem of mental health in the country. And then we also have ecotourism. So this is kind of like a sort of a brief of the various sectors that we see a lot of social enterprises work in. The other point I wanted to make is we've also noted that a lot of the social enterprises that apply funding to us are rather young in their growth. So they're still doing about 300,000 ringgit on average per annum, and they're about 5 years and less. So this is by majority, not all of them, but by majority. So this tells us that there's actually a lot more work that needs to be done, not just from a funding standpoint, but from a non-funding standpoint as well. We think that particularly it'll come in by way of things like technical advisory, coaching, mentoring, any kind of workshopping, networking that we can provide for these enterprises so that they can also meaningfully grow together with the funding that we provide. So again, this is just touching on the various sectors that we have so far up to 2023 supported. In 2024, there's another 70 that will onboard, and that's something that we will publish once we have the full list up on our website. So a point that I wanted to make was, along the way, we realized that we needed to partner up. I think partnerships is definitely something that I think touched on earlier on in this focus group, in this session, that we know that intuitively that there's a lot of social enterprises working in a lots of different parts of the country, and getting access to them and for them to get access to our funding is something that could be a challenge. And that's why in 2024, we partner up with all these organizations that you see on the slides, starting from SCENIC in Sabah, SDEC, Hazwan and team, Atika, then all the others in Peninsular Malaysia, Asia School of Business, My Harapan, Satu Creative, basically to give us a good coverage of all the various regions in the country, to deploy the programs. That means to create awareness. And so what happens is all these social enterprises will work with these organizations to apply for our funding. At this point, we are only doing funding, but going forward, we are looking at ways of leveraging these relationships to develop and deploy more non-funding capacity building type support for all the social enterprises in these regions, basically. So these partnerships for us are very valuable. They give us good insight, good partnerships. We're all aligned, I think, from a value standpoint. Everyone's got a keen interest to support social enterprises. I think they see that that's really something that moves the needle with regards to social and environmental positive impact. And so I'm very, very pleased actually with the partnership so far. And we just want to kind of find a way to grow that scope of work with all these partners. Yeah. And so I just want to cover a couple of case studies of our portfolio companies. So the first one that I want to talk about a little bit about is Agridata in Sabah. So Agridata is a very interesting company because what they do is they're trying to introduce new ways to create sustainable sort of agriculture farming practices. What they do is they work with rural smallholder farmers in Sabah, and they introduce interesting farming techniques whereby the farmers learn basically how to produce at scale without really disrupting the soil. So they're basically given what is called fertiganic, sort of it's not, I wouldn't say it's urban farming, but it's a type of infrastructure where the agriculture does not sit on the soil, and so they're able to basically infuse it with water and nutrition, and so if you can see from the photos, it's all very healthy looking plants. And what this does in Sabah particularly is it offers alternative agriculture produce that they don't have to import. And so what happens is when it's imported, it usually has some level of chemicals, basically to preserve the produce. And so this helps to sort of supply healthy food into the food chain in Sabah. The next one I want to talk about is Antares Ventures. This is another agricultural social enterprise in Sarawak. So basically, they work also with smallholder farmers, basically to produce. In Sarawak, there's quite a number of different types of rice paddy. So these smallholder farmers basically are taught also new farming techniques and able to scale up and then supply rice and different types of rice into the market. So cloth is one in the circularity sector. So they are in Peninsular Malaysia. What they do is they basically, as you can imagine, they are trying to solve the problem of waste, particularly fashion waste. And so what they do is they collect a lot of this waste and then they upcycle it and develop into new products. They've also got new ways of transforming plastic into new types of cloth, and then develop new products basically to market. They not only do that, they also work with a lot of women. So basically offering women income opportunities, basically to work with them and then get a sustainable income and improve their livelihoods. Another case study is again another one from Sarawak. This is one that deals specifically on waste, plastic waste, river waste actually to be specific, and they collect all this plastic from the river and they convert and transform this plastic into usable items to be marketed. And what's interesting is they've developed proprietary technology actually for themselves to be able to do that transformation of the waste into productive for productive use. Last one is Surya Artisan. Basically, as you know, batik is obviously a big thing here. Surya Artisan, what they do is they create a sustainable way of producing batik, particularly on the wastewater. Because as you know, developing batik, you use a lot of water and a lot of it is wasted. So they find ways to basically sort of a closed circuit with regards to being more sustainable in their processes. Okay, plus vibes, I should mention it. This is a mental health social enterprise, as I mentioned earlier. Mental health is a big issue, growing issue. So they've developed a technology for them to roll out mental health solutions to students, to corporate workers, university students, and so on and so forth. So I think these are all my case studies. I just want to say that going forward, we're continuing to support social enterprise by way of funding, but also I think the next shift for us is to find ways to develop non-funding support by way of capacity building. And so we will announce that when the time is right now. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Stanley. I think that, what you described about increasing coverage nationally by partnering with local organizations, I think that's particularly valuable for our audience here because they are all based in Sarawak. And so, if we can find ways for them to build partnerships such as the ones that you have built with Yayasan Hasanah, I think that will really help to extend coverage, particularly as many of them described, the challenges that you mentioned as well, lack of access to funding,
Yeah.
lack of access both ways, right? Lack of access to the SEs. So I think that, on the ground local partnerships with local organizations is going to be one way to address them. We have a lot of questions for you. So one of the first questions we got, good questions. So obviously Yayasan Hasanah gives out a lot of grants. One of the questions is what steps can SEs take to reduce over-reliance on grants while still ensuring financial sustainability during their scaling journey?
We do what we can with the funding that we give. Just to maybe give a little bit more granularity, when we give out grants, so we've got multiple styles of funding, right? We've got our grants and we've got our conditional loans. So what we do is for the grantees, we break down the grants into milestones, and in those milestones, we'd like to fund the growth of the organization. The idea is to bring them to a level of financial sustainability. So grants are not to run projects. Essentially, it's the grants are to build organizational capabilities. Now, whether that means hiring people, whether that means increasing your capital base, capital expenditure, or developing products, the idea is to reach a level of financial sustainability. Now, you're not going to get there by just receiving one grant from Yayasan Hasanah, obviously, but we want to put you on the trajectory whereby you can then grow. Now, if in the event you do grow, then we have other programs, which is our conditional loans, right? So the conditional loans are for those that are already not grant reliant and have developed sort of sustainable revenue bases that now they want to grow even further through our conditional loan. Now, why do I say conditional loan? Is because it's a small portion of grant and a large amount of loans, which is 0%, and you pay back less than what you receive in capital. So the idea why we develop this capital stack is because we want our enterprises to not be so grant reliant, to know that, if you really focus on growing the business, there are other forms of funding that would be available. The question is, we got to work together to ensure your sustainability. I think that's the key here. And that's why I believe that this capacity building element, I think, is gonna be useful going forward, because just putting in money, I think, is half the answer. The other half is really having that sort of guidance as well as you grow the business.
That you have lots of different channels for addressing that, making sure that they're not reliant in the long term.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a bunch of other questions. One of them is, what are the biggest gaps you see in Malaysia's social enterprise ecosystem? And how can funding agencies, government, corporates work together to address
Mm.
these?
Okay, firstly, I want to say though that there are a number of agencies that are supporting social enterprises. I think the issue here at an ecosystem level is maybe the level of coordination could be better.
Mhm.
So if I can maybe say a few things, I do know Bank Negara themselves are very interested in the financial inclusion space. I know Securities Commission has got a funding for social enterprises. I know SME Bank has a funding for social enterprises. Yayasan Hasanah obviously has. I think us working together at this level, I think could be something that can be improved, I must say. And so therefore, if we work together a bit better at that strategic level, I think then more funding, I think, would be unlocked for social enterprises across the country. So that would be my one area, I think, of sort of a low-hanging fruit that I
Right.
think we can fix pretty quickly, I think. And that's one of my work tracks for 2025. Now, it was the question also generally about social enterprises in the country? I'm sure not, right? I think it was more ecosystem. Was it?
Yeah, just nationally, what are the
Yeah.
gaps, and then how are the ecosystem players, such as government, such
Mm,
as funding agencies,
mm,
able to address that? So I think,
mm.
yeah, I think you did answer the question, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
better coordination at a
yeah,
strategic level.
yeah.
And I think that's something, again, that we're going to cover a little bit in the boot camp.
Mm,
How do we map the organization's vision and mission as we're coming up with these social enterprise support programs to the strategic frameworks, in Sarawak's case, for instance, the SABUT framework that Haswan talked about.
yeah,
So that hopefully then, everyone's pulling in the same direction,
yeah, absolutely.
and then working much more efficiently and much more
Yeah,
effectively that way.
yeah.
Okay, wow, you inspired lots of questions, Stanley.
Mm,
Let's see. Someone else had questions again on metrics. So I suppose this is a concern, right? So a lot of our participants here were relatively new to social
mm,
enterprise concepts back in November, which is when we addressed all of that in our beginners workshop. And so I think as they're looking to build programs to support SE, they're very interested to know what sort of metrics they should be tracking
right, right.
as they support the SE. So maybe you could share what sort of metrics YH
Yeah,
tracks when you're
yeah.
supporting SEs.
So, I mean, when we look at metrics, right? So obviously one thing is we want to see the growth of the organization as measured through, let's say, revenue. Okay, so that gives us an idea that operationally they can grow. But on the social and environmental impact, generally, these organizations come to us because they already have an established idea of what they're trying to solve or the problem they're trying to solve. So if I were to talk about, let's say, plastic upcycling, so it's quite intuitive that what we're trying to see is to avoid plastic waste from entering into the waterways or the landfill and so on and so forth. So it's very output related. If you talk about mental health, for example, what we want to see is for all the individuals that utilize the mental health solution, is there a way for us to measure the improvement in their mental health? So it's very specific to an organization and the problem that they're trying to solve. What's important is that they are clear about the problem they want to solve. So that's why our due diligence is rather stringent, I must say, because we want to be sure that the impact that you are trying to address is direct, i.e., your business model is going to directly, whether it is helping with empowerment of B40, whether it's solving the mental health issue, whether it's rolling out educational services through a technological platform, everything has to have a clear, direct correlation to the operations, and thereafter we're able to see the output from the work. So I think when you say matrix, I think it's very specific to an organization's reason for being, I would say.
We have a question from Tagas. So from YH point of view, how does the potential of arts, culture, and
Mm.
tourism related social enterprises in Sarawak look like when it comes to funding? Yeah, so in the past, how has YH supported arts, culture, and tourism in Sarawak SEs?
You see,
What sort of funding support are they given,
right.
and what is that looking like in the future?
So the value of these partnerships is I can hand over questions like that to my friends in Sarawak. So I think Hazwan may want to take. So okay, so jokes aside, so the reason, so we don't I won't say it's a specific focus. However, because we've got partnerships with SDEC, SDEC will then identify areas of priority, right? So if with, and I believe they've got some partnerships with Tegas. So if they feel that there are some projects there that's interesting for us to fund, we depend on SDEC in that way.
No, I just like to say thanks for Stanley for sharing that. I mean, because our partnership is relatively new with Yayasan
Mm.
Hasanah, but we're definitely happy to be able to amplify the other areas that we can work together on in terms of impact, especially because Tegas does have some specialty in running culture arts related and tourism
Sure.
related programs and projects and initiatives. So we're definitely love to explore that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Aswan. Thank you, Stanley. Lots of enthusiasm